financial flows, to me, it might sound as like
the financial flows are in regards to the resources, the taxation, illegal taking of public money.
I think it's towards corruption and issues like that.
In my mind, I just get like this is the money that is taken away from the government illegally.
Tax justice. I don't have so much information about tax justice.
Tax justice? Oh gosh.
Tax justice. Just being fair to all citizens in the country.
Tax justice is tax should be collected. Tax must be collected, but then it's not be over taxed.
Tax justice. How can I explain tax justice?
I think tax justice means that the money that is collected from the public as taxes should benefit those that have been taxed from.
The gap between the poor.
Inequality is where other people have money and others don't have money.
If you say inequality, it means some people have a lot, yet others don't actually have.
Inequality today on our continent poses one of the biggest threats to our future development. A staggering statistic today places the richest 300 people on our planet with the same financial resources as the poorest 3 billion.
I think that inequality is one of the biggest challenges that is facing the world today. Now, when you look at inequality, of course, you can have different dimensions of inequality. You can talk of geographical inequality, which is the divide between the north and the south. And of course, even within countries, we see in developing countries, when you talk of the whole agenda around Africa rising, it's actually the top rich in Africa that are growing. So inequality within countries, inequality between regions, north and south. There are different dimensions you can measure inequality, you can determine inequality and its impact on world peace, on sustainable development, on economic development, on democracy. So it is really a scourge that needs to be urgently addressed, and the reality is that this amount of wealth that is concentrated on the top, 1% is hidden offshore. A big part of that is hidden within the different tax havens spread across the world.
The UK alone has 15 crown dependencies in overseas territories, which are sucking the whole proceeds of corruption, criminal activity, tax dodging from all over the world. The Isle of Man, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, all these are entities under British Crown dependency. So the destination of illicit financial flows from developing countries is the rich countries.
So we see, inequality does not exist in a vacuum. Leakage of our resources from multinational corporations and wealthy elites are all factors contributing and sustaining inequality. IFFs are further maintained by exploiting loopholes in the flawed global financial system, coupled with tax evasion, legal tax avoidance, and tax havens. The tax justice solution means individuals and companies are paying the right amount of tax in countries that they operate, and thus breaking the chains of underdevelopment and poverty. But what is the link that keeps this distorted system in check? Today's global financial system is a cauldron of secrecy, deregulation, and an unaccountable international tax system. All these contribute to sustaining the current financial status quo, firmly in favour of the rich. This hegemonic structure offers perspective on how Africa's resource wealth is contrasted by its inequality and poverty. Let's take Zambia. While copper exports from Zambia account for 70% of Africa's total production, regular fluctuation in commodity prices and the combined effects of IFFs mean the benefits of real economic transformation for many Zambians is often negligible.
The money that we collect from the mines, we use it for capital projects, these being the bridges and then building of hospitals and schools, so that even the people outside the CBD area can have access to clinics and then proper healthcare, so to say, and then also basic education. So that is some of the things that we use the money for, that we collect from the mines.
If you look at the projected figures from Zambia, it is said that Zambia has lost about $8.8 billion in illicit capital flight from the mining industry, and those are significant figures. We would have been in a position to provide a better quality of education for our children, would have been in a position also to improve our agricultural methods. In short, would have had the money to invest in other sectors.
When you look around this town, there are no roads, there are no proper hospitals, there's no proper housing, there's not even a central sewer system that can ensure that this place is safe.
There are several ways that you can look at a mine when it's established. One of them is that, okay, there are prospects of employment. There are also prospects to work with the mines in doing business. There are also prospects, for example, that the area will develop because taxes will actually develop the residences, the townships, and the villages around there. You know, when you monitor and look at the mines, look at Solwezi itself, Solwezi is still an undeveloped town. And then you wonder, what has been the benefits to the people that have actually allowed these mines to be set up?
They take these resources to develop their own countries and improve the standard of living of their people. But here we are left with nothing. They take away our minerals, they go. No enough schools, no job opportunities, no training facilities. In fact, those money that has been is being delivered from the mine should come to the people, to the citizens, to the community, so that they improve their standard of living and their welfare. So we request the government to look into this condition immediately. We cannot be left like slaves. Our wealth has been stolen. Where are we? This is our motherland. We've got nowhere to go.
But wait. If it's the responsibility of national and municipal governments to ensure collection of tax revenues for our resources, what's going wrong?
Efforts of the Zambian government to increase its taxes during the commodity boom, when the prices of copper was high, were largely resisted by the mining companies there. Because of the stability clauses it had signed with these companies, it was not able to regulate, it was not able to adjust the taxes correspondingly to be able to reap or to be able to harvest more in terms of revenue.
The role and purpose of government is the same all over the world. It is to serve the public interest. Tax dodging, benefiting loopholes and secrecy jurisdictions to avoid tax paying by stashing assets and proceeds of business activities in tax havens is all against public interest. Zambia is a very good case in point. For example, just Google and see from which country is the major copper exporter. It is Switzerland. The benefits accruing from copper processing falls more in Switzerland than it happens in Zambia. We know the measures which are adequate. We know the enablers. We know the structures facilitating all these things. When I say we, governments know it as well. So what is lacking is the adequate implementation of the measures to stop this practice. If this is not happening, it is, I think, because of a pervasive state capture which prevents governments from implementing measures in public interest.
So with stability clauses, state capture and corporate interests at play, this provides damning testimony of how Africa is perpetually subsidizing the northern and more developed economies.
So you have a situation where the continent's resources are being hemorrhaged, with the continent is bleeding of the resources that it direly need to invest in its healthcare system, to invest in its education, to invest in all kinds of different government programs that are necessary to alleviate poverty and address all the kind of serious challenges that the continent is facing. So the bigger source of these outflows is a result of activities, commercial activities, of unscrupulous multinational companies that are avoiding paying the taxes in the countries where they operate, using all the different kinds of misinvoicing, underreporting, and others. And of course there is corruption, which is another source where as a result of corrupt activities by state officials, public officials, the continent is losing quite some huge resources. And thirdly, as a result of criminal activities, money laundering and so on. But of all these three, tax evasion and tax avoidance presents about 60% of the entire outflow of resources from the continent.
In addressing the challenges to the outflows, Tax Justice Network Africa are at the forefront in supporting public mobilization and awareness raising. Trainings and public outreach are aimed at building capacity of civil society, journalists, members of parliament, and students to engage in tax justice policy discourse.
Tax, it's a bread and butter issue. It's my money. So somebody has to know what it is about. So in our work around tax, we have tried to push that message across. That tax is about your money. You are a citizen of any given country. So whatever money comes into that country is your money, whether it's aid, whether it's your taxes, all that is your money. Because even if a government gets a loan, it's the citizens who are going to pay that loan from your taxes. So we try to simplify issues of taxation and to put the people at the center of the taxation debate.
Because of our numbers, we can influence decision making. 70% of Ugandans are youth below the age of 30. What does that mean? That actually about 50% to 60% are in classroom studying. They have the power to actually exert the pressure. Because of the numbers we have and the energies we have, we can mobilize ourselves. Since we are the biggest, we don't even call ourselves a demography anymore. We are a population.
Firstly, do you even know that there's IFFs? And if you do, what does that mean to you as a political party? In election campaigns, in parties that are in parliament, because we just say MPs, some come from ruling parties, some from opposition. Those that are in ruling parties, how are you influencing your own ruling party in terms of IFF? But more so, because parliamentarians get a budget for constituencies, are you taking this as an issue at constituency level, where you are saying in terms of mobilization, how do I take this message and explain it to an ordinary African? I mean, Panama Papers came. For Africa, we say they came, they are gone. For most African communities, it has meant nothing. People don't even know what that is. So we are saying at APNIFT, it is your role as an MP to take this message to that lower level, because these are the people that vote and keep governments afloat. If they are not empowered to know what is going on, they are never going to hold governments accountable.
In gaining accountability, the African Union, jointly with the ECA, set up the high-level panel on IFFs. Chaired by Thabo Mbeki, the panel released a report in 2015 with recommendation for governments to curtail the outflows. In supporting these efforts, civil society's launch of the Stop the Bleeding campaign is now recognized as a major stalwart in the fight against the outflows.
I must say in that context, I think it's good that we will be doing something about this campaign, Stop the Bleeding, because clearly civil society is critically important in terms of this implementation part. Because I'm sorry to say this, many of our governments will only act on this if there is pressure from the people. Never mind what they signed here in Addis Ababa. But when there is pressure, then people are marching up and down Cairo Road in Lusaka, then Alex Chikwanda here will then say, look, let's act on this thing.
Even if we don't achieve anything with this Stop the Bleeding campaign, even if it contributes to the change of perspective in Africa, to make Africans aware they are losing more resources than they get in the form of aid and foreign direct investment. Even this is for me transformational change.
All these very basic fundamental rights people must have, that for me is the question. So when you look at that and the solutions that the IFF agenda presents, if we were to close these loopholes, the interconnectedness of them make this question one that we can't avoid to deal. We must confront head on. Sometimes you have to look at it in a more long term. The tree we plant today will provide shades for our grand and great grandchildren and not necessarily for us. So it is a fight, it's a struggle. We will do our part. Future generation will carry the fight forward, and we hope that in the near future we live in a continent free of poverty. We live in a continent that is free of the impoverishment that many of our citizens in the continent are facing.
From Tax Justice Network Africa to the high level panel and now the grassroots level, the responsibility lies with you and you to demand equitable, progressive, accountable and transparent tax systems so that together we can stop the bleeding.